Hey everybody, welcome to the first video from Patrick and Aaron. Today we're going to go over some coffee options for travelers. So basically you need to be conscious of how much space these brew kits will take up. So today we're going to be going over 3 different options that you can do as a traveler and some pros and cons to each, and then we'll do a little taste test at the end. So let's get going. Okay, so when I was researching for different portable brew kit options, I basically came up with 3 myself, although the possibilities are basically endless. So for me it was basically some kind of a pour-over option. Obviously there was the French press that I had been using for years beforehand, and then there was also something called a mocha Italian coffee maker, which is a stovetop unit which sits right on the stove and it actually brews for you. I've also used that in the past. I ended up narrowing it down to 2 different options, the pour-over press and the French press. So that's what I have with me right now. We'll make coffee in both of them, and then we'll kind of compare it to your standard Mr. Coffee machine, and just kind of see how it turns out, and then we'll go over some pros and cons of each. Okay, so pretty much anywhere you go in the United States, you're going to have one of these babies somewhere within, a decent radius that you can reach. Our apartment came fully furnished, and it came with the Mr. Coffee. So I used the Mr. Coffee for the first day, and then I promptly stopped using it. And I'll show you why. So here is the coffee that it brews. Looks pretty good. We'll do a taste test later. But here's the problem that we were having with it. Besides that it's a pretty big unit, I mean, you could fit it in your car and travel around with it, but it's not super portable. And then here's the real problem with it, is the brewing method. So come on over and I'll show you the problem here with the Mr. Coffee machine. Okay, so you can see in here where it's doing the actual brewing underneath this head that actually brings the water out. Take a look at the pattern of the brewing there, okay? You can see that most of the water goes right there, and then over at the edge over here, look, almost completely dry. Like, that's not even hot, I can touch it. So that's the big problem here, is that it overbrews right here, and then the water barely even touches all the grounds on the side. So look at the amount of grinds that we used for like 2 cups of coffee. That's huge. That's not even efficient, and it doesn't create a very good coffee. So that's my issue with the drip machine. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to do 2 different brewing methods. First, I'm going to start with the French press. I've been using this for years, so I'm very comfortable with how I like it and my personal preferences. I'm not the cleanest, but that's what rags are for. You just give it a quick little stir. And we're going to set a timer for about 45 minutes then, okay? So this will be ready at 45 minutes while we do the AeroPress in the meantime. Okay, and here's the new AeroPress that I have. So I just bought this and I've been experimenting. I've only been trying with 1 different brewing style. Now the water goes in. They have little sections that you can see here that give you little guides based on how many grounds of the scoops you've been using. And here's the fun part. And we're done! Okay, so here's the final product. I have a little bit more in the glass from the Mr. Coffee and the French press, so the color is going to look a little darker just because there's extra volume in each one of these. Also, I used different beans for the Mr. Coffee because, quite frankly, I didn't want to waste my nice beans on a brewing system that I knew would burn them. So here is what we have from the AeroPress. You can kind of see it creates kind of a... it looks like an espresso almost. And that's kind of almost what it tastes like too. This is about half the capacity for the chamber, so it only brews about double this, even if you make the full chamber's worth. Then over here at the Mr. Coffee station, it just looks like regular black coffee that you could pretty much find anywhere, and that's what it tastes like. It's pretty standard. And then over here at the French press, you can kind of see that the color is a little bit lighter. It looks similar to the AeroPress, but the color is a little bit lighter overall. than the other two methods. And you can adjust that due to preferences and grind size as well. So let's go ahead and try each one of these. Okay, Mr. Coffee time. So I use different grind, different beans for the Mr. Coffee because I already know that I really didn't want to use my own beans for it. So it's not exactly a fair apples to apples comparison, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and try it. So it's actually not bad, and it's super easy to make, but it's burned, and you can taste the burned flavor with every sip. But that's not a huge deal if you're just wanting a cup of coffee. So it's not bad, but it's also not portable, and it even takes a little bit longer than the AeroPress too. So those are 3 things to consider. And here is the French press. I have been using the French press probably for the better part of like 7 or 8 years now for all of my brewing needs. When I was traveling in Jacksonville, New Mexico, I used the French press because it's super, super small. You could travel with it anywhere, and it weighs nothing, and if you break the beaker, you literally just have to buy a new beaker and just throw it in. It's super, super replaceable parts. Anyway, these are the good beans, so this will be a more direct comparison to the AeroPress. Okay, so right away, no burnt flavor at all. But that's just because I've gotten used to what kind of grind size I prefer, the brew time that I prefer. I went ahead and plunged it off video already, so you didn't see that part, but the aromas are great. The French press does sometimes leave a lot of oils in it, which I personally like because I think they impart a little bit more flavor, but I'm not any kind of a coffee connoisseur, so I don't actually know if that's correct or not. But you can definitely see some of the oil floating on top. And that's very much in difference to what you would see from an espresso maker, which I guess I'm kind of considering is the gold standard for this video, but I don't have an espresso maker, so we're doing these 3 instead. And here we have the AeroPresses. So this creates a very, very strong, almost espresso-like. You look on the top, no oil. There's a little paper filter. I use 1 per week, so I barely go through any of them. It comes with like, 120 of them or something like that. So if you just keep rinsing it out, it's actually quite, eco-friendly. You don't have to use so many reusable paper filters. And they're only that big to begin with anyhow. So that actually filters out most of the oil, and you basically never have any of those little grits or sludge that can sometimes, eke their way around the plunger in the French press either, so something to consider. And you definitely get a different flavor profile. For me, it's definitely more of less aromatic, but somehow it seems to impart different like roasting flavors to it. I'm not really sure how, because even though AeroPress and French press were brewed from the exact same beans, and I've been using the brewing style with both of those that I'm most familiar and comfortable with and most practiced with, the taste is slightly different, and different enough that you can definitely tell. I'm not sure in a blind taste test I would be able to say, oh, this is definitely from the AeroPress, or oh, this is definitely from some kind of a French press. But if you were to give me a blind taste test, I'm pretty sure I could say, oh, there's a difference, and I'm not sure what it is, and I still have only had the AeroPress for, week and a half now, so I've only used it a handful of times, and I haven't had time to properly really dive into all the different variables that you can play with. Maybe there's just different uses for each one, but personally I'm excited and very looking forward very much to using the AeroPress more, just because it's super easy to use. The brew time is under a minute, and it's super easy to clean up and clean out. Kind of just like the French press, except that the French press does take 4 to 6 minutes for brew time. So if you're looking for something super portable, there's a myriad of options, but I would highly recommend looking into either a French press to start, or maybe even delving into some pour-over options like a V60 or an AeroPress as well. I hope it was informative.